hopefully we will still have time for questions.
Figured I should check just to be safe. Thank you all for coming. My name is Joe Grand, also known as Kingpin. I want to give a little bit of sort of a background for those who weren't around 20 years ago. Just sort of understand, I'm going to give you a little bit about my history, but also just understand what the LOpht was about. Because we didn't just magically put on a bunch of suits and show up here.
We didn't have suits.
Yeah, we can buy them.
You borrowed your dad's.
That was my dad's suit, okay. Anyway, so I was the youngest member of the LOpht.
Still are.
Proud to say.
Still are.
Yeah, so anyway, I first got involved in computers and electronics in 1982, 7-year-old. And if you think about back in the 80s, like people didn't just have computers. It was a much different world. You had to either have a parent that was involved in computers or be really lucky. So I just sort of fell in love with technology. I had the Atari 400 with the modem, the board systems, and compare that today, where now everybody can reach everybody. I figured out how to make free telephone calls using stolen access codes when I was 10 years old, because phone calls cost money and I needed to put it away. That just seemed normal to me. I built my first circuit board when I was 13 with electronic cards. As you'll see, I was sort of an outlier in LOpht, not only being youngest, but also being into the hardware side of things. Trying to yell and scream about hardware, which now, luckily, is a valid thing. So I sort of tumbled into, I guess what you would call like technological until I was about 16 years old. And I got arrested at 16, which really was the turning point for me. Not a lot of that information in public. I did give a talk on it. The whole details of that, watch at a different time. But the important thing is that admitting that past is very important, right? Because security nowadays, the hacker mindset, you see a lot of people getting into InfoSec that didn't have a background like that. That's okay, but there are a lot of people that come from that background, and I think that's okay, that we come from different places and have gotten in trouble and have done questionable things, because that brings all these different perspectives to a community and to an industry that really needs it. You can't have, one homogenous group. You have all these different mindsets. So I also joined the LOpht when I was 16. After getting in trouble, that really was that kind of redirection where these guys and the guys that aren't here became my mentors, whether they knew it or not. I was learning from them about the importance of using my passion for the greater good and the good side of what hacking can do, and the importance of sharing information, which has continued on until today. And that's something that we can all learn from, regardless of what the information is. It's just sharing it. Somebody somewhere can learn from that. That's a really important lesson. After the LOpht, I continued still today independently kind of wave the flag of hardware and hardware security and kind of the excitement around electronics and the things that we rely on day to day. We don't even think about it anymore. We have our phones, we have computers. The room now looks a lot different than it did 20 years ago because we had camera crews and giant cameras. Now people have little cell phones and record on this tiny little webcam. The technology is everywhere, and it's like still fascinating. But we rely on it so much, and there's some really big dangers. So I started my own company after the LOpht and after we started at Stake, called Grand Idea Studio, and it really is just here about electronics and about hardware hacking and about security of products and trying to get people to think about products, not just using them. I was on a host of a show called Prototype This on Discovery Channel, which was another way to share engineering and get the next generation of people involved in building and in technology, and hopefully we make hacking as well. Hacking for the exploratory part, but hacking from the InfoSec part as well, becoming part of the cybersecurity. I currently train organizations now on hardware hacking and how to defeat security of hardware products, mostly because securing things is really hard, but also being able to teach people the mindset of hackers so they can then choose the best solutions for their products. Because it's not one solution for everybody. And as Space Rogue said, nothing's ever going to be under here. So you can think the way that products are being hacked. You can say, okay, these are the areas of my particular thing that I need to protect. At the LOpht, we try to be the voice in raising awareness for problems. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and hopefully we can. I have a few kind of sections. I'm not going to read all of this, unfortunately. I have two different sections. One is sort of a perspective of hardware security, because like I mentioned, I've been passionate about hardware for a long time. Nearly all of what we said 20 years ago holds true. Yes, there have been improvements, but the general classes of problems and things came. Originally we were talking about the internet as this burgeoning platform. Not everybody even had home computers at that point. We had desktop computers and servers and some software, Windows. There was still Apple back then. Spacer was a big Apple fan. But now we have the Internet of Things. We have home users plugging in all sorts of devices to their networks. We have industrial control. We have SCADA. Everything is connected to the internet. I don't know why that is. I don't know how that became. Nobody had anticipated that. All of these little devices. The problem is now, instead of having all of these high-resource, high-powered computer systems that we originally were worried about, now we have low-resource, trained devices that have network access that really, in my opinion, don't have the functionality or the capability of even being there. And people are just slapping this stuff in all over the place. It's crazy. So I think what's really changed since 20 years ago is the scale of the problem. Because of all of the new devices, and our risks now have just exploded. Like Mudge just said about all of the critical infrastructure, everything, we're relying on it, and somehow everything is just. What we're also seeing is a lot of traditional software hackers, network hackers, getting into hardware hacking because it's a new platform, and it's a new area, it's a new way in. What we're seeing not only in the hacker community, but also in nation-state level attacks, are using hardware as that stepping stone to give you access into a network. Maybe getting a hard-coded credential stored in a piece of memory on a physical piece of electronics that's a network-connected device, pull that information off, and then use that with your software-style, network-style attacks to continue with your attack. So it's not just protecting the piece of hardware; it's that you can use that for other things. Very, very interesting kind of perspective. And hardware now is used for data exfiltration. It could be simply modify functionality of the device through the Mirai botnet and a bunch of other botnets we've seen with IoT devices. Used for denial of service. So you have all of these, poorly designed devices that are now compromised by some individual or group of individuals that are now all just sending data at one denial of service and use IoT devices, where it used to just be using network-connected computers. That's not. The barrier to entry is low with hardware, and we see news articles all about this, and it's almost the Black Hat and DEFCON season where lots of the presentations come out about computer security and a lot of hardware stuff. None of this stuff should really be a surprise. The design of these systems are not that great. There are some that are good, but things like there's no basic encryption, no authentication, no code signing to verify that what it's running is correct. Using default network configurations, hard-coded credentials, backdoors, unprotected debug ports, things that we used to refer to as at the Loft as low-hanging fruit. Things that were like so easy they shouldn't even be allowed to be used to hack something. But that's the case, and I see a few hardware people in the audience that I know, and they're sort of snickering right now because we don't need to have high-tech attacks. 20 years ago, we didn't need to have high-tech attacks. We still don't, for the most part. There are some systems, I would say like game consoles and mobile phones probably have the best security of consumer devices, and those require groups of amazingly talented people to deliver security. And that security created by large companies. You imagine how hard it is for that. Everything else underneath is very, very easy. Mudge had said actually 20 years ago, simple security mechanisms are missing. It's cheaper, it's easier for companies, and there's no reliability. When vulnerabilities are found, at the Loft we were a lot of times forcing vendors to either fix their problems or saying, okay, we're going to release this exploit code, whether you fix a problem or not, so other people can protect themselves. And a lot of times when vulnerabilities are found, it's really easy to blame the people that are working on the products. And I see that a lot with hardware hacking nowadays. I see it a lot with other vulnerabilities as well. Oh, that person should have known how to configure their network, or they should have known how to build in proper secure process into a design. And I think that's not really a reasonable expectation, because engineers and people that are working on the ground building products are not security professionals. It's almost two separate worlds, except for a few of us that were lucky to kind of have to bridge that gap. But most people are trained for engineering, or they're trained for great if those worlds can mix. And sometimes we see that at conferences, but it really hasn't. So we put these expectations on products that we expect to be secure, but they're not. engineers' goals is to get products working, get them done on time, under budget, just like sort of any other process. Security, maybe if they're thinking about it, another really interesting thing is that engineers are using resources from the vendors. So when an engineer designs a product, they're not working in a little cave somewhere. They're taking information from chip vendors, from module vendors, pieces, the building blocks that make up products. They're going to use whatever the vendor tells them to use to build the product. Those resources, things like reference design, or basically like a recommended of a product. Sample code. Here's how you implement crypto for the product. Engineers take that stuff, put it right into their design. They don't vet it. Sometimes maybe people do, usually they don't. And they use it as is. So I think that what we can strive for is less of pointing fingers at engineers and more at forcing responsibility onto the vendors and saying, look, if you're selling a chip that does incorporate a security feature and you want engineers to use it, why don't you put more resources providing some of the security background, making it easier for an engineer to use, so they don't accidentally make a mistake in implementing it correctly, which is a so sort of the vendors being able to provide more of that resource where engineers don't have to think as much when they're implementing the system. The resources that they're using are going to be better. Mudge also said 20 years ago, education is one of the largest things that is really missing from out of this, and that's still true. Education really is the thing, but I think it's not necessarily, it is at a lower level, the engineers, but I think, again, it's the higher level education and having that trickle down to everybody that's involved in the process. Let's see. So, general thoughts on cybersecurity. Even with all the problems we're seeing, I know Space Road touched on this as well, and Mudge did too. We're seeing still a lot of the same issues, a lot of the same problems, but we are seeing positive change. Lots of researchers now are out there looking for vulnerabilities in products, whether they're external researchers, independent like we were, or working within companies to find problems. And that's pretty amazing because when we were at the LOpht, there weren't that many people doing it. When we started at Stake, we wanted to be an independent research group within a consulting company, and people didn't know what to do. It was like what? You want to just find problems and help people fix them, but not do consulting? It was a very interesting time. But now people are doing that, and it really is helping the process of finding these problems and trying to bring more education to everybody, which is great. The bug bounty programs. There's even bug bounty programs and companies that will help other companies that don't have the resources to do bug bounties and provide incentivized, disclosure or how to deal with the hackers, which is great because not everybody knows how to deal with them. A lot of hackers don't know how to deal with vendors properly, so it's really interesting. A lot of vendors are becoming responsive to the fact that there are security problems in their products. We always joked about like you're basically calling up somebody's baby ugly when you find a security problem in somebody's product, and that's a really hard thing. Now that I have kids, it's like I would hate if somebody called my baby ugly. But you can do it in a very tactful way. I think a friend of mine said to me, "Wow, your baby is like an alien," and like he didn't say ugly, but he said alien, and like I thought that was actually cool because aliens are like do it in a certain way, right? And that's what I'm getting at is you don't have to just come in and say I'm a hacker, I'm better, I found a problem. There's a way to do things properly, and vendors are becoming responsive. It's really great. And some companies are really good approaches, good attempts at security. We just need more of that. And I think, like I mentioned, the scale of things, there's this many people doing things that are right, and there's this many people that are getting involved in doing things that are wrong. We also have a security versus convenience issue that we talked about way back in the day, and that's still true. It's sort of human nature that there's a security mechanism in place that inconveniences an end user. The end user is going to figure out a way to get around it. Same thing with designing security into products. If it's inconvenient or if it's not easy enough for a designer to do, they're not going to do it. And that's just human nature. So I just threw this in. I wasn't actually expecting to quote Donald Trump today.
Neither will we.
But I'm going to take the opportunity to great. What he said, I just read this in the text, he said this yesterday, is that it was too inconvenient to swap out the phone he uses for Twitter to check for signs of compromise. That's infinite. So he's basically choosing to live with the risk of having a hacked phone because he feels that convenience is more important than security. That exemplifies the actual reality of security versus convenience. And this is a big problem for security engineers. We deal with this all the time because security is hard, and doing it in a way that people are going to use is even harder. And the fact that the president, who's possibly the most targeted person in the world, doesn't want to trade his phone makes you really think about, is anybody else going to do that, and why should they? And that leads to my final point is attacks have become so commonplace that we're desensitized to what's happening out there. And people just don't really seem to be as surprised or as concerned with like, oh, there's been a new hack, a new breach, a new whatever. Because it's just, we see it all the time. We see branded exploits, we see logos for things. Like, we didn't name our exploits back in the day. I think we had a title, but no name. It's a really big thing. So the exploits, we get the media frenzy about whatever new breach has happened. And then the users or the customers get placated in some way. Oh, we care about your privacy or your data. We'll do something about it. But then stock prices end up going up. The world keeps turning, and then we move on to the next attack. So it's really like it's almost a problem because we're so used to being hacked that we almost don't want to go around and fix it. Right, straight from the testimony. It really is that thing. So I live and breathe sort of hacker ethic. Hackers have done great things, and they'll continue to do great things. But the pessimist in me, and people might hate me for saying this, is that I think cybersecurity has become like any other big business. And maybe it was 20 years ago and I just didn't see it because I was too young. But if you think about the healthcare industry, animal agriculture industry, the war industry, as long as there's huge amounts of money to be made, either from the good side, so say the defense and protection side, or the bad side, criminal elements, nation states, whatever, we might never reach a happy ending. It'll be this perpetual problem, and I really think that's going to happen. So anyway, thanks for listening. I look forward to the rest of our discussion if we have time. So
We do have time. I've been told that we are